This story takes place nearly 15 years ago when I was on summer break. I was 15 years old and grew up in a very run-of-the-mill, middle-class neighborhood in San Antonio, Texas. Our house sat on a corner, and the fence around the backyard had horizontal wood beams that almost made an X, as opposed to a vertical fence post that I'm more familiar with. Because of this, there were larger gaps between the beams, and seeing through was fairly easy. Another detail worth noting: our back gate on the side of the house, the one that dumped out onto our street, had been found wide open many mornings that summer. And because of this, my dad had looped some wire through the latch and twisted it like a bread tie in order to keep it engaged and closed. Although there were several more times that we would still find it open. In our backyard, there was a large deck and an above-ground pool that the deck was built up to on one end. There was a huge, beautiful oak tree that shaded the deck in the part of the pool closest to our house. So my sister and I would anchor our feet at the farthest edge, closest to the back corner of the fence, and sunbathe in our pool on our floats. This story happened to occur on a Sunday. My grandfather was visiting from out of town, and he and my parents were inside, napping. My older sister was gone with her friends, off at somebody else's house, some other pool, and I decided to go float in our backyard. My mom closes the blinds to the back and habitually locks the back door before lying down on the couch to snooze. I'm in the pool for maybe 20 minutes, and I can see that someone is standing on the other side of the fence, looking in. Although the sun is shining in my face, so I can't see who it is very well, and while I find it weird, I don't say a thing. I see whoever it is walk off, and I think that that's the end of that. Minutes pass, and I decide to swim around a bit, just in order to cool off before getting back on my float. This time on my stomach, with my face looking up at the house instead of off towards the fence. It feels like only a minute has passed, and that's when I hear the sound of wood creaking. I turn around, and that's when I see a man halfway over my backyard fence, maybe only 20 feet away from me once he hits the ground. Part of me is in absolute shock, and I know that I froze for a moment before sheer terror and panic took over. I realize this isn't a dream. It's really happening, and I need to get inside of my house. Now. I felt as though the pool became Olympic-sized, and I couldn't maneuver myself to the edge and climb out fast enough. By the time I make it out of the pool and start running towards my back door, the man has already made his way around the pool and is walking his way up the deck as well. He was maybe in his late 20s, early 30s at most. Gaunt, thin, and around my height, around 5'9". Once he hopped over the fence, he never broke stride, walking slowly and steadily. His gait would give Michael Myers a run for his money, and he never uttered a word. I get to my back door, and just my luck, my mom has locked it. I begin screaming and hitting the window pane. "Let me in! Let me in!" At least my mom was right there to unlock it, but at that point, 10 seconds felt like 10 minutes. And by the time my mom opened the door, the man was standing right behind me, equipped with this blank look emanating from his eyes. I'm in tears already. My grandfather is freaking out. All the while, the man is just standing there, looking inside our home. That's when my dad makes it downstairs, and he goes crazy, screaming at the man. He pushed him off our deck and told him to get lost. At this point, my mom is on the phone with the police, and the next moment makes this whole thing 10 times creepier. The man gets up from where he lands on our lawn, walks around the house over to our back gate, the one that had the wire in the latch. He untwisted it and pushed through, looking as if he'd done this many times before, leaving the gate wide open as he walked back across the street and into our neighbor's home. The police arrive a few minutes later, and after being pointed to our neighbor's house, they head inside and retrieve the guy that had just been on our property. Turns out, the man had been staying with his sister for the past 8 weeks and was on parole, and was recently released from jail on theft and assault charges. He had also broken into several different neighbors' homes and stolen some china and a few of their family photos. He went back to jail, and we never found our back gate open again. I still get chills thinking about this, because my sister and I both had our bedrooms downstairs with our windows facing the backyard, and there's no doubt in my mind that he was coming into our yard and watching us at night. My parents moved out of this home a few years later when I went off to college, but I slept upstairs on a pull-out couch for months after this, and pledged to myself that I will never live on a ground floor again, so long as I can help it. I'm sure this isn't as creepy as most stories, but it is something that I think about from time to time. A little background: I grew up in a very emotionally and physically abusive home. I never had anything but negativity spoken to me, and as a child, I believed it all. My self-esteem was at rock bottom, and I believed that I was no good, that everyone hated me as I was being told constantly. I became a very shy, withdrawn person who really made little effort with friendships. I held everyone at arm's length, but was desperate for any small scraps of positive attention. I found this positivity in a wonderful young couple who came into our church to be youth leaders. I was bullied terribly by the kids at my church and hated going, until this couple came there. They were young, sweet, and kind, and they went out of their way to be especially nice to me. They arranged a picnic and hike at a close-by state park for one Saturday. I was around 11 years old at this point, and ordinarily, I wouldn't participate in these types of outings. But since they'd both be there, I was excited to go. We met at the church and all got on the bus. I heard a few whispered comments about, "Why is she here?" and about my clothes, my hair, and pretty much anything else that kids would normally tease another kid about. I did my best to ignore them all and sat by myself in the back of the bus. We got to the park and I mostly hung out with the couple, who I'll call S for the hubby and C for the wife. We had a big cookout near the lake, and afterwards, all went for a hike. There were quite a few kids there, so S and C had their hands full on the hike, keeping everyone on the trail. I, of course, was in the rear of the line. The kids I was behind started making fun of me, and telling me I was too lazy to make the hike, and no one wanted me there anyway. Then they ran ahead, laughing. I slowed down till they got out of sight. Then I sat on a rock, crying. In a minute or two, I heard someone speak to me. I looked up, wiping my eyes, and there was a man standing right by me. I hadn't heard anyone walk up the trail. I stood and he asked if I was okay. I nodded yes. Then he told me that I looked sad and asked me if I'd like to talk to him. I opened up a little bit, told him why I was there and that the other kids didn't like me or want me there. He asked my name, where I was from, how old I was, and me, being a dumb 11-year-old kid, told him all of the above. He was probably in his mid-20s with blonde hair and was actually rather cute. I was thrilled that he was being nice to me. He gave me a hug and said that he and I could hang out and he'd take me back to my group once they came back down off the hike. He took my hand and told me we'd go hiking a trail that he knew. I agreed. All of a sudden, I hear S yell my name, tell me to stop and to get away from that man. He came running up and got in between me and the guy before he starts asking the guy what he thinks he's doing. The guy just shrugged and started walking away through the trees. Not on the trail. S asked me if I was okay, if that guy hurt me. I could tell S was very angry, so I teared up yet again because I thought I was in trouble. S squatted down in front of me and told me that I wasn't in trouble, that I'd done nothing wrong. I told him that we just talked a little, and he was going to show me another trail to hike. S nodded and told me we'd just catch up with the others. He pulled C to the side once we caught up, and they spoke quietly. Then she motioned for me to come over to her. She put her arm around me and we sat on a rock, talked and laughed. She had me walk beside her on the way back down and sit with her on the bus. The two of them made the rest of the day nice for me. It took me years to realize what could have happened to me that day and why S was so angry. Obviously, once S and C got to the stopping point on the trail, which was a stream with a sliding rock, they realized that I was missing, and S came back down the trail looking for me. If he'd been even a few seconds later, I would have been gone with that man, and God only knows what his plan was once he got me out of sight. I know just how blessed I am that my guardian angel was working overtime that day. Due to my home life, I never told my family about what had nearly happened that day. I was always made to feel like I was the one responsible for what other people did or how they acted. I was terrified that I'd get the blame for this, so it was just easier in my mind as a child and beyond to not bring this to the people that wouldn't support me anyway. I have no clue if S&C reported this encounter to the Rangers or not. I certainly hope they did though, because if it was so easy for that man to almost walk off with me, who knows how many other young girls he did that to. Fall 2017. I was freshly 18 years old and starting my freshman year at a huge university, 8 hours away from my home. Quite a lot was going on in my life, as this was the first time ever moving cities, and my first time as a young woman living parent-free. After 18 years of living with limited independence and a very strict household, I was going through all the wacky culture shock and mental/emotional changes most college freshmen go through within the first few days of moving onto campus. This was my very first day of classes. After my final class of the day, which wrapped up around 6 p.m., I stopped by one of the food courts on campus to pick up something to eat. I was too hungry to wait to get back to my dorm, so I sat alone on a bench in a courtyard between two buildings and began to eat. Yeah, I know, walking and eating alone was probably a really stupid idea, but I was naive as hell and figured that at a huge college campus, I would only be surrounded by other lost, confused students like myself. I also had no friends since I moved to the city and school, not knowing a single person. And my raging social anxiety made me hesitant to try to meet new people anyway. I was alone on a bench, eating my food, when an oddly looking couple approached me. A tall, muscular, bald man and a petite Latina, or maybe Asian-looking woman, with glasses and a bob-style haircut, who was holding a few books herself. The man was completely silent, but the woman enthusiastically approached me, introducing herself as Carmen in an ambiguous accent. She didn't even attempt to introduce the man, and he just stood there silently. She started asking me stuff. My name, year, where I was from, what I was majoring in, before telling me that she was from a Bible study group here in the city that a lot of college students find interest in. She opened up a Bible and started reading me some random passage before explaining it and continuing to talk more and more about this group. She asked if I'd be interested, and I quickly shot her down by explaining that I had no time in my schedule with all my classes. I took my phone out of my pocket to check the time. At this point, she had already been lecturing me for about 20 minutes, and I made up some weird, ridiculous lie about how I had to leave immediately. That's when she snatched my phone from my hand and was like, "Wait, before you leave, I'm going to give you my contact information so you can let me know later if you're still interested." She then proceeded to put her number into my contacts. As I said, I was deep in culture shock of the whole brand new college freshman experience. I was terribly shy, and I didn't have the confidence to be assertive in this kind of situation. I just let her do her thing. She gave me my phone back, and I headed off to my dorm. I approached the communal hall and realized I didn't have my keys or wallet, even though I swore that I was holding them at the time that the couple had approached me. I frantically ran back to the bench area and searched it thoroughly. Went through my backpack, went through the nearby trash can. Nothing. I couldn't get into my dorm without my keys or ID, so I crumbled to the ground, crying and calling my dad in a straight panic. This was my first time ever losing my keys or wallet in public, days after moving to a new city, and for an insecure 18-year-old, it felt like my life was over. My dad could only do so much to calm me from 8 hours away, so he instructed me to call the campus police. I did, and an officer arrived and asked me for details of where I was, what my things looked like, etc. I didn't mention the odd Bible study couple to him at all, because I found myself still in such a panic. I didn't think to consider they might have had any involvement, or even any way of taking my things from my backpack. I still feel very incredibly stupid for not providing this detail. The officer gave me temporary dorm access and instructed me to contact the PD daily to check if any missing items had turned up. I was overcome with relief when I received an email 2 or maybe 3 days later from an RA in a dorm halfway across campus, saying that my keys and wallet were turned into their lost and found. I never did see that couple around campus again. I avoided going places alone other than class. A few months later, I was scrolling through social media to see multiple posts about an ongoing sex trafficking ring in the area, where the instigators would introduce themselves as Bible study groups. My stomach practically dropped to the middle of the earth. This sounded way too similar to the couple that approached me before my belongings mysteriously disappeared. Years later, I still feel like an utter and complete idiot for being more freaked out over my missing things than I was about the encounter with these two strangers.